It would be ridiculous for someone to fast at a wedding. Moreover, to fast while others are enjoying the wedding feast would be an insult to the bridegroom. Here we see the Lord's wisdom. He did not argue with them, but he certainly condemned the religious ones. The Lord seemed to be saying, "You religious people have missed the mark. Don't you realize that I am the bridegroom and that all my disciples around me are the sons of the bride chamber? They shouldn't be fasting. They must feast with me." Without these two cases, the Lord Jesus could never have been revealed as the physician and as the bridegroom. We should thank the Lord for the Pharisees and for the disciples of John. We should even thank the Lord for all the religions. For without the occasions afforded by religion, the Lord could not be revealed in so many different aspects. It is the same today. Life Study of Matthew, Message 28, the continuation of the King's ministry. This message is a continuation of the previous message on chapter 9, verse 9 to 17, not putting a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. In chapter 9, verse 16, the Lord continues with something even finer, sweeter, and more intimate. He says, "Now no one puts a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for that which fills it up pulls away from the garment, and a worse tear is made." The Greek word translated unshrunk is apnergos, formed with a, which means knot, and nepto, which means to cut or comb wool, hence to dress or full the cloth. Thus, the word means uncarded, unfull, unfinished, unshrunk, untreated. The unshrunk cloth signifies Christ from his incarnation to his crucifixion as a piece of new cloth, untreated, unfinished, whereas the new garment in Luke chapter 5 verse 36 signifies Christ after being treated in his crucifixion as a new robe. The Greek word for new in Luke chapter 5 verse 36 is kainos, the same as the word for fresh in Matthew chapter 9 verse 17. Christ was firstly the unshrunk cloth for making a new garment, and then through his death and resurrection, he was made a new garment to cover us as our righteousness before God, that we might be justified by God and acceptable to him. A patch of unshrunk cloth put on an old garment pulls away from the garment by its shrinking strength, thus making the tear worse. To do this means to imitate what Christ did in his human life on earth. This is what today's modernists are attempting. They only imitate Jesus' human deeds to improve their behavior. They do not believe in the crucified Jesus as their Redeemer or the resurrected Christ as their new garment to cover them as their righteousness before God. The old garment in verse 16 signifies man's good behavior, good deeds, and religious practices by his own natural life. The Lord Jesus was very wise. In verse 16, he did not say, "You disciples of John must realize that your garments are torn and full of holes. By fasting, you are actually cutting a piece of unshrunk cloth and using it to patch the holes in your garments." Instead of saying this directly, the Lord Jesus indicated to the disciples of John that they did not have a perfect garment. He indicated that their garments had holes and that by fasting they were trying to patch the holes. No human being could utter such a word as that spoken by the Lord Jesus in verse 16. His wise word is full of meaning, rebuke, revelation, and instruction. The Lord was saying to the disciples of John, "Why do you ask me about fasting? Your fasting is a way of patching your torn garment. By your fasting, you show that you realize that you have holes in your garments that need to be mended. Your teacher, John, introduced you all to me. Now you are utilizing me to patch your holes. This means that you are cutting a piece from my unshrunk cloth to mend the holes in your garments. But my cloth is full of shrinking power. Don't put any part of it on your old torn garments. If you do, the hole will become larger." The account in Luke chapter 5 verse 36 is somewhat different from that in Matthew chapter 9 verse 16. Luke chapter 5:36 says, "No man tears a patch from a new garment and puts it on an old." Notice that Matthew says cloth and that Luke says garment. The Lord Jesus likened himself to a piece of unstrung cloth. This points to what he was between his incarnation and his crucifixion. During this period of time, he was unstrung cloth, new cloth that had never been fooled or dealt with. Through his death and resurrection, this new cloth was dealt with and was made a new garment. The Lord's intention was to give himself to us not as a piece of unstrung cloth, but as a complete finished garment, that we might put on as our righteousness, to be justified before God. After his death and resurrection, he was made the finished garment for us to put on, so that we may attend his wedding. Thus he is not only the bridegroom, but also our wedding garment that qualifies us to attend his wedding feast. Why did the Lord Jesus, after telling us that he is the bridegroom, go on to speak of the new cloth, the new garment? We must look deeper to discern his meaning. The Lord tells us that the bridegroom is with us. But look at yourself. Do you deserve his presence? Do you think that your real condition in the eyes of God is worthy of the presence of the bridegroom? We must all answer no. All we have and all we are does not deserve the Lord's presence. To enjoy the Lord's presence, we need certain qualifications. We need to be in certain condition, in a certain situation. What we are by birth, what we are naturally, whatever we can do and whatever we have, do not qualify us to be in the presence of the bridegroom. The bridegroom is Christ, and Christ is God himself. Suppose God appeared to you today, could you just sit there? He is the holy God, the righteous God, and such a one is the bridegroom. Recall the story of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15. The prodigal son came home. The father undoubtedly loved him deeply, but the son's condition was utterly unfit for the presence of the father. Therefore, the father immediately told his servant to take the best robe and to put it on him, thus making him fit for his presence. Our bridegroom is God himself. How may we, poor sinners, enjoy the presence of the heavenly King? We must remember the context of these verses in Matthew chapter 9. The Lord Jesus was eating with tax collectors and sinners. We are tax collectors and sinners. We are not qualified. We need something to cover us that we may sit in the presence of the Lord. This is why, after the Lord spoke of himself as the bridegroom, he told us that we need to be clothed in a new garment. When we put on the new garment, we are worthy of his presence. When the prodigal son was clothed with the best robe, he could immediately stand in the presence of his honored father. The best robe qualified him to enjoy the father's presence. We, as sinners and tax collectors, need to be clothed in a new garment, that we may be worthy of the bridegroom's presence.